Star Trek Enterprise had only really hit its stride and become a solid addition to the franchise by the third season of the show. The Xindi arc was well written and packed full of action, intrigue, and a compelling season-long story. But it was Season 4 that made Enterprise the prequel it really should have been from the beginning. At last, we got stories that tied into long-time Trek canon, some brilliant episodes and fantastic writing, but for most fans, the highlight of that season was the two-part Mirror Universe episode In a Mirror Darkly, where we see Mirror Universe versions of the NX-01 crew, and they encounter the USS Defiant from the original series episode The Tholian Web. The ship was sent back in time and into the Mirror Universe, and we got a fun two-parter out of that show. Now, as fun as that two-parter was, it could have potentially been even better, because William Shatner was originally supposed to appear in those two episodes, playing Tiberius, the Mirror Universe version of Captain James T. Kirk. I've done a video on this topic already, but I wanted to discuss it again after reading this article. This is from TrekMovie.com. Paramount focus grouped William Shatner's return on Star Trek Enterprise before rejecting idea. One of the interesting roads not taken in Star Trek was the potential return of William Shatner in Star Trek Enterprise over a decade after his last appearance as Captain James T. Kirk in the film Star Trek Generations. At that time, Enterprise had struggled to get a fourth season approved by UPN, the now defunct United Paramount Network. Bringing Shatner back was seen as a potential way to boost flagging ratings. Some of the elements that were part of the plan for this potential guest role of a Trek icon have been covered in articles and books. But we have picked up some more details thanks to our recent conversation with Enterprise writer-producer Mike Sussman. The issue is, however, as much as the studio would have liked to have had a boost in ratings, Enterprise had been cancelled at the end of its third season and then renewed for Season 4, basically in order to bring the show up to 98 episodes, which is close enough to the all-important 100-episode syndication milestone. As a result, they probably had no interest in investing more money on a show that was only months away from being cancelled for good. It says the potential guest appearance of William Shatner and how it shook out came up during Mike Sussman's All Access Star Trek podcast discussion. He summarised what happened back in 2004 as the fourth season of Enterprise was being developed. Showrunner Manny Coto, one of the ideas he put on the board at the beginning of Season 4, was that he wanted to do a Mirror Universe episode, preferably a two-parter. There was a long discussion about getting Bill Shatner on the show. We were trying for months to make it happen, but ultimately the network or the studio wouldn't meet his quote. So it sounds like the studio or network were unwilling to pay Shatner the money he wanted, and thus we never got what could have been an iconic episode of Star Trek. After all, Shatner hadn't appeared on any of the modern Trek shows at that time, so his return would have been a major ratings grabber, a major TV moment. But as I've said, it's money that talks. Why UPN said no. During the podcast, Sussman opined on why UPN wasn't willing to pay up for Shatner. I don't think he was asking for too much, but I think from the standpoint of the studio, had it happened earlier, maybe in Season 3, they would have been more likely to go for it. But by this point in Season 4, I think the writing was on the wall, so the feeling was, well, why spend the money? After the podcast wrapped up, Trek Movie asked Sussman if he remembered anything more about Paramount's Shatner decision, and he said they actually did some testing. I was in executive producer Rick Berman's office for notes or something, and Rick had a DVD. He said, "I want to show you something." It was a short promo the studio was using for market research, trying to figure out how much interest there might be if we brought Bill onto the show. They tested it in Vegas, showing the promo to a cross-section of regular people. The narrator said something like, "A legend returns to Star Trek," over a slow-motion clip from The Wrath of Khan, the scene where Kirk walks onto the bridge simulator, dramatically backlit with light and smoke. I never heard about the results of those focus groups, but suffice it to say, the studio ultimately decided that whatever Shatner was asking wasn't worth the potential bump in ratings. So that's an interesting bit of information I wasn't aware of. They created a promo to gauge audience feedback and to see how much appetite there might have been for Shatner's return. Of course, it's only Kirk's mirror universe self, so it's not really Kirk, but I have no doubt that this would have brought back a lot of long-time Trek fans to the show because, as I remember at the time, there were actually a lot of older fans who'd stopped watching mid-Voyager and didn't have much interest in Enterprise. And that was a genuine situation. A percentage of some of the older fans just preferred TOS, the movies, and TNG, and that was enough for them. So it says Shatner would have played Tiberius. If UPN had given the green light to the Shatner return, it would have been a completely different story than In a Mirror Darkly, Sussman explained during the podcast. It was an entirely different story generated by Judy and Garfield Reeve-Stevens, who had worked a lot with Bill and had written books with him about the return of Kirk after his death in Generations. They cooked up a story about Tiberius, whom Shatner would have played. We'd find out that he went back in time after being zapped by the Tantalus device by Mirror Spock, and so we run across him, and now he and Archer, who start off initially as adversaries, end up having to work together in order to somehow create the Mirror Universe. I'm sure that would have been a super fun show, but like I said, we couldn't make the deal. To be fair though, In a Mirror Darkly, as it is a fantastic episode, and I'm glad we got what we got in the end. Now, I do remember after Enterprise was cancelled, there was a big fan campaign to have the show renewed for a 5th season. It was never going to happen. But I do wonder if this proposed Shatner Mirror Universe episode could have created a significant enough ratings increase to give the studio some food for thought. Could this have saved Star Trek Enterprise? Probably not. Like I said, Enterprise had only really hit its stride, and I think a 5th season would have really cemented it as something special in the franchise, and if for nothing else, would have provided the opportunity to undo the terrible death of Trip Tucker in the abysmal series finale, These Are the Voyages. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have liked to have seen this episode, or are you happy with how In a Mirror Darkly ended up? Subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit that notification bell to be notified of future updates. Please share the video out there, hit that like button. Take care, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.